Hey everyone, it's Kendall from the Recording Lounge podcast, and today I'm going to teach you a better way to clean up your tom mics. I regularly use gate plugins on things like kick and snare, and gates seem to respond really well to those sources. However, I'm always a bit disappointed with how well they work on toms. They're tough to dial in just right. They seem to miss certain hits, or they struggle with tom builds. Maybe they cut the sustain a bit too short, or they leave it too long. And even if you're using a sidechain function, they can still mistrigger from certain things like loud snare hits or loud cymbal hits. So instead, I'm going to show you my 3-step process for cleaning up my tom mics. It only takes a few minutes once you get used to it, and I'm always happier with the results. So I want to teach it to you. First things first, let's take a listen to our drums as is. Now, they sound great, but let's take a listen to our toms in solo. As you can hear, there's quite a bit of bleed, not only from cymbals, but also from the toms just sort of rumbling around in the background. And I will say, it's important to try to tame as much of this as possible while you're recording, by utilizing certain types of polar patterns and good mic placement. But in the mix, we have to work with what we're given. Now, you might be asking, why do I need to clean up all that stuff? Doesn't it sound good? Well, yes and no. It might sound okay, but it doesn't sound as good as the cymbals in my overheads or in my rooms, and having that much bleed can just make that more phasey and harsh. Cymbals in a tom mic don't necessarily sound that great, and in terms of the low rumble, that can just make my drum mix more muddy and less clear, so I want to get rid of that stuff because I want a nice controlled drum mix that I can really have ultimate flexibility with. So I'm going to show you how to do that. Now, the first step in this process is to make it easier on ourselves to visually see where the tom hits are. As you can see here, it's not always easy to tell what is a tom hit and what might be bleed. These are probably tom hits, but what about the stuff in here, right? Now, on the floor tom, it's a little bit easier, but on a rack tom, it can be very difficult, and we don't want to have to listen to the entire song top to bottom just to know where our tom hits are. It can take 4 or 5 minutes, depending on how long the song is, right? So instead, I'm going to teach you an easier way. Within Nuendo and Cubase, we have something called direct offline processing, which is sort of like Audio Suite in Pro Tools, but one thing I like about how it works in Nuendo and Cubase is that it updates the waveform in real time, and it's super easy to disable this process once we're done. So first things first, I'm going to open up my direct offline processing. I'm going to select my tom clips, and I'm going to add an instance of FabFilter Pro Q, but any EQ plugin would work. Now, I'm going to take all of my high end out of these toms. Now you can tell it's very easy to see where all of the tom hits are. We've removed all of our high frequencies, and we're just left with the low ones. So now it's very easy to tell every single time there's a tom hit, and this will make it a lot easier for editing. Now, of course, we wouldn't want to leave it like this, but we'll fix that in step 2. So now that we have a better visual cue, we can move on to step 2, which is editing through the entire song manually, creating fades and cutting out all the space in between tom hits. Now, the real trick to this is that at the start of your tom fill, you want a really short fade, and at the end of your tom fill, you want a much longer fade. Okay, this will give the tom ample time to sustain. And even though there's still going to be a bit of cymbal bleed here, we're going to clean that up in step 3. So I'm going to do a time lapse of me editing all of these toms throughout the song. And even though I'm doing a time lapse, it only takes about a minute to do. So I'll see you on the other side. Okay, so we've gone through our entire song and edited all of the spots where our tom fills happen. We did a short fade at the beginning and a long fade at the end. Now, of course, our toms still sound like this. So we need to remove that direct offline processing that we did by selecting our regions again, opening up the plugin, and getting rid of it. Now, we no longer need our editing aid, so our toms sound normal again. The only problem is we still have some cymbal bleed, so we need to take care of that using a multiband expander. Now, you could do this on the waveforms directly using direct offline processing, but sometimes it's easier to do it as a plugin. So let me open up my floor tom, and I'm going to add an instance of FabFilter Pro MB, which works really well for this. Now, normally I have a preset for this, but I'm going to show you how to set it up from scratch. Once you do it, you can save it as a preset, and it will only take you a number of seconds to do, as opposed to what I'm going to show you here. So you're going to start with a wide high shelf, and the default 24 dB per octave slope works really well. I like to reduce my range to about -20, sometimes -22 or 3 or 4, somewhere around there typically works. How about -22? You're going to go into your panel here and click Expand. I like to set my ratio to about 6:1, my attack all the way fast, my knee all the way to the left, which means a hard knee. We'll start with our threshold all the way up. I'm going to go ahead and do Look Ahead and set this to 5 milliseconds. Now we're going to go into our Expert panel, and we're going to change this to Free. This allows us to set our sidechain band for our high frequency band. So what we're doing is we're triggering our high frequency expansion from our low end. When you play your tom, this is what you're going to get. So what you need to do is bring your threshold down until your low frequencies are triggering this band to expand. So you can hear what's happening. Our high frequency band is essentially acting like a gate, and our low frequencies, the actual low fundamental of the tom and the low sustain, is not being touched at all. So we never have to worry about our low frequencies getting cut off. Now, there are some plugins on the market that try to do this, like the aux for drum gate, but again, sometimes it will miss hits. It can't quite be as flexible as building this yourself in something like Pro MB or a Waves plugin, or there's many, many multiband expanders and gates on the market. They all basically do the same thing. I think Pro MB is probably the most flexible, and it sounds really good. Now, once I've gone through, I will do the exact same thing to my rack tom. And once I've done that, I will either print this processing or I'll just leave it as a plugin. But when you're done, you have a much cleaner tom sound. You can go ahead and render your toms to make it easier to see. This makes it very easy in the mix to get a good idea of where a tom fill might happen if you need to do some automation, or if you want to turn this one up, for example, that's a little quiet compared to these others. I find this much easier than using a gate and spending all that time trying to dial it in just right, and you get great results every time. I hope you enjoyed this video on how to clean up your toms. I hope it's helpful for you. This is the method that I use on every single drum recording that I do, unless of course the bleed just isn't a problem and/or that's the kind of vibe we're going for. But I would say about 90% of the time, this is how I clean up my toms. As always, check out the Recording Lounge podcast. Make sure to check out the Discord channel. There's a link in the description below. And thanks for watching. I'll talk to you next time.